Blowfly 2 Over the Limit retails for $4 on Steam and is a really unique and fun game. The evil ass man is gathering poop to make weapons. You play as a superhero Blowfly whose mission is to collect all the poo and stop the evil ass man's mission. And you are the only one who could do it since you're a fly and the smell of poo doesn't bother you. It's a pretty ridiculous premise, but it definitely made me laugh and set the stage nicely for 40 levels of collecting poo and dodging a crap ton of obstacles. The controls are simple and responsive. By tapping the button, you can kind of float all around. The best way to describe it is kind of like underwater controls in a Mario level, and you could dash in any direction by hitting a button. This serves as both an attack and a means to avoid obstacles. The dash has a meter that refills over time, but by landing or mashing the flight button, it fills up much quicker. That's really it as far as controls go. You'll understand the mechanics of how everything works in a matter of seconds. And while you don't unlock any new moves, the level design gets progressively more challenging. The game is constantly throwing new obstacles at you. The level design here is simply fantastic. Each level is only around a minute or so, and you have pretty liberal checkpoints sprinkled about. Everything kills you in one hit, and there are lots of things to kill you. Every world introduces new hazards and uses them in progressively more complex ways. You get your standard fare like spikes littered everywhere and moving buzzsaws, and the later levels introduce instant death walls, homing missiles, among other obstacles, all of which are really fun to learn and navigate. It's definitely a game where you die a ton, but the levels are so short and the checkpoints are so frequent, I never got frustrated a single time, even when I was dying and over again to pass a tricky obstacle. It really does a nice job of balancing that addicting one more try feel of gameplay while keeping frustration non-existent. Every world ends in a boss. These were all fun to fight. You just keep ramming them until they die. They change up their patterns mid-fight to become a little more difficult, but overall, these were mostly pretty easy, but they were fun. And by pretty easy, I mean you're still gonna die, you'll just die less than in some of the other parts of the game. Overall, this is a fantastic hidden gem for a dirt cheap price. It took me a little over an hour to beat, but its unique gameplay mechanics, solid challenge, goofy story, and awesome visuals make this a no-brainer. Definitely something more people need to play. Nuclear Cheetah is a really fast Sonic the Hedgehog inspired platformer that sells for $5 on Steam. This is a fast game. Your Cheetah accelerates really quickly, so if you love the speed of Sonic, you will feel right at home here. He could air dash and slide along the ground, which is used both for attacking and helping you clear large gaps. The sense of speed was a bit overwhelming for me. I was never great at Sonic games, and it is sometimes hard to keep track of everything with how fast your little guy runs. Also, just beating the levels is not enough. Every level has 3 orbs. One you get for completion, one for collecting a certain amount of stars, and one for achieving an S rank. In order to challenge the boss, you need to get at least 2 orbs per level. Be prepared to replay some of these levels, as very often you will not meet the requirements on your first go. There are checkpoints, but they are more or less useless, as they do not save the number of stars you collected, and dying prevents you from getting an S rank, so you'll have to beat the levels flawlessly if you want one of the other 2 orbs. It's not a long game, so having to replay the levels does add to the longevity. I was never really able to achieve an S rank, but collecting the necessary stars was generally doable with a little practice. If you're okay with that and love Sonic, then you will enjoy this game a ton, but I could see some people getting off-put by this. In addition to the base game, you get 2 free games. One is a more challenging DLC style where you unlock 5 additional worlds, and the other is a totally different campaign where you play as Cheetah's friend Tony. The amount of content here is really impressive. The base game alone is easily worth $5. Throw in the 2 bonus games and it's a steal. At the time of this writing, the game only has 22 Steam reviews, which is a shame because this is a really high quality Sonic clone that needs more love. Captain Sharkbait is a 3D platformer heavily inspired by Crash Bandicoot that sells for $1. When I first turned the game on, my initial reaction was, well, you get what you pay for. The animation was not great, and while the controls were responsive, the jumping just felt really floaty. I couldn't get used to it at first. I died a bunch very early on level 1 because I just couldn't make basic jumps. But give yourself a few minutes to get acclimated to how the jumping feels, because it actually does work really well once you get used to it. And there's always a little marker indicating where you're going to land, which is really useful for some of the tiny platforms you have to jump on in this game. The level design is mostly 3D behind the back platforming on linear levels, very similar to Crash Bandicoot. You also get a time challenge as well as a challenge to break every barrel in every level, so the game definitely does not hide its inspiration. But the gameplay itself is fun and challenging. challenging. Every world just throws new stuff at you, the environments were all fun to explore, and despite the tiny platforms, I never really had any difficulty landing my jumps once I got acclimated to it. It also does a fantastic job of mixing up the playstyles. Every other level is some kind of gimmick. You get mine carts, a kart racer, a 2D underwater shmup, a UFO ride, just to name a few. They totally mix up the gameplay. Each of them have their own unique controls, but the game only displays them in the keyboard prompts when it instructs you how to do the level, even though the game has joystick support. So that was weird, and once or twice I didn't know what the buttons did what on my controller. It didn't take long to figure out, but it was just kind of annoying, and it was worth mentioning. The kart racer level was definitely the hardest. I'm really bad at racing games, and I hate when platformers throw in a really difficult racing level. It's extremely unforgiving, and you have to do a near perfect run in order to beat it in time, which I eventually did, but I almost gave up. I have some PTSD from early PS2 era platformers that did this that I never beat. I think it was either Ratchet & Clank or Sly Cooper. I can't remember because it's been so long, but I remember rage quitting on whichever of those games had a racing level. Despite that, the rest of the gimmicks were fun and the main platforming levels were well done and challenging. This is not a game that's going to be on anyone's best games of all time list, but I also had a lot more fun with it than I thought I would, given its cheesy aesthetic and low asking price. If the footage here looks interesting to you, give it a shot. You may be pleasantly surprised. Dead Lasso is a really fun mini Metroidvania that sells full price for $2 on Steam. The game starts off by dropping you off in the middle of a large map, which at first is just a grid with question marks everywhere. You can't check the map until you're at a checkpoint, but given the frequency of checkpoints, that is not a problem, and later on in the game you do unlock the ability to check the map at any time. You start off with just the ability to jump and are left with no real direction to explore, but the game is really intuitive. Exploring was always fun, and I never got lost in my entire playthrough. As you explore, you see that most of the question marks are treasure bags, which increase your completion percentage at the top of the screen. You're going to need to collect everything in order to complete the game, so be sure to leave no question mark left behind. If you make it to the end without 100% completion, the game tells you to go back and find all the bags. Of course, you also find a whole host of upgrades. No Metroidvania would be complete without getting the ability to double jump, but you also get dashes, the ability to swim, triple jump, and use your lasso as a helicopter. The control is smooth and your character moves really fast. As you unlock new abilities, exploring the map gets more and more fun as you chain all of your abilities together to cover really long ground. There are question marks everywhere, and upgrades are frequent enough that you always feel like you are unlocking a new ability or area to explore. There is no combat in this game. Enemies are few and far between. You may run into an occasional skeleton or flying wyvern. Dodging them is simple enough and lets you get right back into the exploration, and there are no boss battles either. The whole game will take you about 2 hours to complete. I beat this game in one sitting, and it definitely kept me hooked until the end. I didn't want to put it down until it was over. It also ends on a surprisingly dark note and opens up the possibility of a sequel. I definitely hope that happens because this game was superb, especially given its low price tag. Vector Lord is a psychedelic twin-stick shooter that sells for $5 on Steam. The game starts out by having you choose a difficulty level: easy, not easy, and 1983. The standard difficulty is not easy, and that is definitely not an exaggeration. I always like to start games on the standard difficulty and then adjust based on how I'm doing, and I wasn't doing so great. By the time I got to the third level, I was completely stonewalled. This is a really difficult game, so I wimped out and turned it down to easy, which was also not easy, but it was easier, and I was able to finish the game on this difficulty level. There are a lot of interesting mechanics in this game. At its core, it's a twin-stick shooter, but it's a vertically scrolling one where the screen is constantly moving upwards and enemies are just pouring in from all directions shooting at you. So in some sense, it's almost like a shmup. There are enemies and bullet everywhere. It's definitely very bullet helly, and you get an invincible dash as well as a bunch of other power-ups. There are also these totem poles sprinkled throughout the environment that you can warp to get out of trouble, which becomes really handy when you're stuck in a menage of bullets that you can't escape from otherwise. There are these black areas all around the environment known as the Void. By standing in them and moving around, you are totally safe from enemy fire, but if you stand there for too long, you take damage. It's a really interesting mechanic that leads to some level design that you don't normally see, and it is something you must use. Knowing when to pop in and out of the Void is going to be essential for success. I think that's why I struggled so much in the beginning. I was just avoiding the Void totally, and you just can't beat the game doing that. But once you adjust to it, the game becomes a frantic dance of popping in and out of the void while dodging screens full of projectiles and enemies. You get 4 weapons that you can switch between at any time, but you could also pick up weapon power-ups to stack your weapons and combine them in a variety of different ways to produce new, stronger weapons. It was a really cool system and fun experimenting with all the different combinations to see what happened. And you also get an extra hit point when your weapons are stacked. And you're going to need more powerful weapons because these enemies are spongy. Some of them just don't go down. So this is not a game where you're going to be able to clear the screen. You have to prioritize the little ones and dodge the big ones so you don't get overwhelmed. It's a truly frantic and difficult game. The visuals are eye-popping, psychedelic, bright colors. It's got a really cool style and a great soundtrack to keep it all moving. One thing I didn't love was the power-up system. You get these purple crystals everywhere that you need to unlock new levels and upgrades. The thing is, you can only equip one upgrade at a time, and the extra hit point for me was just better than every other upgrade, so it had potential, but it was never really realized. Outside of that though, this is a truly fantastic game that's unique and really difficult. It also includes branching paths, so you get a lot of content here for the low asking price of $5.